and that is on the issue of national debt. And I'd like to pick up just where you left off. You say our partners are open to renegotiation. However, on the matter of renegotiating our debt, Honorable Ruto, you just last week in an interview with the international press said you will not be entertaining discussions around renegotiating our debt. In fact, with respect to your competitor, who is not here with us today, when he brought up the issue, you in fact called his statement on that condescending and reckless. Mr. Deputy President, are you tonight changing your position and saying you will renegotiate and seek to restructure our debt?
Not at all. I still believe, as I stand here, that it is reckless for anybody to say we cannot pay our debts. I believe that we have what it takes to pay our debts. And mark you, what we were discussing about VAT is very different from negotiating our debts.
But it is tied to the IMF facility, which is a loan.
It's completely different.
How so?
What we cannot entertain as a country is a position that we cannot pay. We are in a position that we can't service our debt. We cannot. We need to go out there and renegotiate our debt. I think that would send the wrong signal. What I would do on matters to do with the debt, we have a plan as Kenya Kwanza on how to manage debt. Number one, we have said we will first slow down, put the brakes on borrowing. Number two, we will put brakes on unbudgeted projects. In fact, that is the biggest source of our problem. Projects that are not within the budget, so that we cannot keep our fiscal deficit at what we have committed, 5% or 5.9%. Number three, we need to raise our revenues. And I have said openly that we have areas that we believe that we can raise our revenue. For example, we collect 52% of all collectible VAT. Just by automation and computerization, we can actually raise 95% of all collectible VAT. That would give us an extra 450 billion Kenya shillings. And added on to that, if you raise that kind of VAT, you can equally raise from corporate tax an additional 200, maybe 150 billion shillings. So there is room to raise additional funding, additional revenue for us to manage our debt without necessarily going to say we're going to negotiate our debt.
So I hear you saying that our national debt as it stands today is manageable.
Our debt today is a challenge. We need to deal with it. We are not sitting pretty. We are living, if I may say, we are living beyond our means. And that is why I am saying that we should stop this borrowing spree. Let me give you, in our first term, we borrowed 2.2 trillion. From 2017, our handshake brothers have borrowed 4.2 trillion. That's what's the source of concern. And it's not a source of concern to me. It's a source of concern to Kenyans as well. And it's even a source of concern to our development partners. They are beginning to raise issues about our debt. And more so, the trajectory of continued borrowing. So that's why I'm saying our administration will first slow down on borrowing, remove unbudgeted projects, because that's the biggest incentive, and then go back to raising our own revenue.
Do you
And
have
there
figures
are
that
areas
you are targeting? When you say remove unbudgeted projects, how much are we talking about? When you say slow down on borrowing, from what amount to what amount are you talking about?
When you look at our fiscal deficit, right, there are too many projects that are not in the that are not budgeted for. For example, the Uhuru Gardens Museum. You don't see it anywhere in government budgets, but it's been built. So these are the kind of projects.
Do you know how much?
That,
for example,
I think
in the last financial year,
we've spent close to 15 billion in that project.
In the last financial year, Honorable Deputy President,
Yes.
do you know how much of unbudgeted projects we spent
Actually, unbudgeted projects are in the region of 100 billion. Unbudgeted projects. And that is what is spiraling our borrowing. And I'm saying that our first, and that's why, if you go today to the website of the Ministry of Finance, you will hardly find any paperwork there. You will hardly find any, because there are too many projects that cannot be accounted for that are being done without a budget line. If you look at the expenditure on contingency fund, which is supposed to spend only up to 5% of the budget, sometimes it goes to 50% of the budget. So that is where we need to apply the brakes. And we are saying clearly, we not only have a plan on slowing down on borrowing, we also have a plan on raising revenue in targeted areas. Areas that would give us much more resources to run our budget, number one, and two, to also manage our repayment. And in that particular instance, you may want to know that almost 80% of all our borrowing is actually domestic, which means we are also hurting our own enterprises locally. Access to credit becomes a big challenge. We must think of how we must slow down on borrowing locally and see how we can externalize government borrowing. And it doesn't have to be borrowing. Some of the programs, we must get the stock exchange to take up some of the areas of raising revenue. The stock exchange is a wonderful instrument. We saw it when we were selling the shares of Safaricom. Safaricom was looking for 50 billion. They got 250 billion. It tells you there is a lot of money out there. If we used different instruments, how do we use the different instruments of raising capital for long-term investment using the instruments we have, revenue, and using the stock exchange? So these are avenues that are available for us to be able to take our development forward and minimize on borrowing.
Honorable Ruto, while we stay on the issue of national debt for a moment, for decades the Treasury has refused to make public contracts that have been signed with some of our lenders like the Exim Bank of China or the China Development Bank. You've been part of a government that has refused to make this information public. Why?
Those contracts and agreements, in accordance with the Constitution, are public documents. And the public have a right to know and to have access to that information. The fact that that information is not being made public is against the Constitution. So, under
but yet,
the
Mr.
Kenya
Deputy
Kwanza
President,
administration,
you have not this is something that you could do. You are the deputy president of this republic. Is this not something you could do or make happen?
When you are deputy president, I'm sorry you've not been one, you would understand to what extent you can do things. And let me give you an example. Many people did not see the mettle of Mwai Kibaki until he was president. When he became president, he made a sterling job of being president. All along, everybody thought he was a lackluster performer. I am undertaking to the people of Kenya that given a chance to be president, things will be different in Kenya.
So let me ask this just one more time. You are the sitting deputy president of this. You say this should have happened constitutionally, but it did not. Was this not something that came up in cabinet meetings, that at least we've not seen you protest about this particular matter? Because debt transparency and debt, what we owe and who we are paying is something that taxpayers should know. So if you are saying this is something that should have happened but didn't, why would Kenyans believe you when you say that this is something you will do if elected president?
Because I have never been president before. This is the first time I am vying to be president. And this is the first time I will occupy the high office of president. This is when the buck will stop with me.
Are you saying, Mr. Deputy President, that in the last 9 years, you have sat in cabinet meetings and expressly said that you would like the contracts details to be released to the public?
I will not tell you whatever discussions took place in cabinet, because
we are seeking to understand, Your Excellency,
because
is what role you played
it is not in
making
place.
Sure that the government that you serve is actually adhering to the Constitution and several court orders.
Whenever it was available for me to take a position, I have always taken a position. And I have taken many positions. Sometimes that did not look very popular, if you may. And I have taken very firm positions in cabinet. And I have taken very firm positions in the public. And I think people of Kenya know me not as a coward. They know that I take what I believe in, and I take positions. I am saying here that every contract signed by the government of Kenya is a public document, and it should be available to the public.
The question of the SGR contract was raised even in the first term of your administration. It has never been made public. Mr. Deputy President, you don't have any record, any public record of you saying that these contracts should be made public. Why?
You see, as Deputy President, there is so much that you can do. In fact, my role, my oath of office has 4 functions. Number 1, I swear allegiance to the people of Kenya and to the Republic, to discharge every responsibility given to me by the Constitution and the law. And number 3, to advise whenever required. That's the language of the Constitution. Whenever required, the President on matters that he requires advice. And number 4 is to serve people equally and fairly. So I have discharged that responsibility to the best of my ability. And I have made my position in regard to the contracts very well known to the right officers. It is not a matter I would have wanted to take it in public for purposes of making sure that government is functional.
All right, I have just one last question on this before we move to our next topic of discussion, because you've informed us about, from what I understand, and you can correct me, Honorable Ruto, about the limited sort of powers of the Deputy President. Is that what you're saying in respect to making these contracts public? You said, and I quote, "I can only do so much as a Deputy President."
Absolutely.
Okay. However, in previous television interviews, you have stated that you and the President remain accountable for everything that has been done for this. So which is it, Mr. Deputy President? Are you responsible for not making these contracts public? Because you in the past have said that you and the President remain accountable and should be asked about everything that happens in this country.
Precisely, that's why you're asking me, and I have answered you. I have said clearly that to the extent that my duty as Deputy President is concerned, I have discharged my responsibility. I have given advice to my boss on many issues, including that particular issue. So I have given him my advice, enumerating very well that it is the constitutional position that every contract is made public. I have given that advice to the President as is required of me. So, but you know the buck stops with the boss.
Honorable Deputy President, let's now move to the next topic